Hey guys, and welcome back to another segment of Reading Until I Hate Myself. Just like the last video, the following footage of me reading is unedited, except for one part where it stopped recording and I had to start it again. Whatever, I'm sorry. I am sick, so yes, I know that my voice is a little bit wonky, but we're just going with it. Today's video is going to be a little or a lot different than my last one. After the other video, someone suggested that I write a script for my next one. So everyone give a big thanks to Jacob for this video being so freaking long. I kid. But this video is actually turning out to be a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. I'll put timestamps in the description below if I can figure out how to do that, if you want to skip around like I did reading the story. Now, despite not reading the story in its entirety, I have a lot to say, which, if you know me, is not a surprise. Now, could this video be summed up with just a basic, "This sucks, don't read it, it's bad"? Yes, it could. Will I be nitpicky? Yes. Will that make the video even longer than it needs to be? Also, yes. Will most of you not care or watch the whole video? Again, yes. Does that mean I'll cater to my very, very small audience and make this a nice, short, concise, manageable 10-minute video? Heck no. Just kidding. I love you guys. Thanks for watching and supporting me. I do want to put a disclaimer in here. I don't hate the author. I don't think they're like a horrible person, and I actually think it's really admirable that they have a completed story under their belt. But if you post it, I can roast it. For this video, I decided to read a story from Wattpad or Wattpad or however you want to pronounce it. Wattpad, if you don't know, is an online platform where people can put their writings out there for the public. What I love about this platform is the endless supply of bad content. There are the occasional gems hidden within the sea of unpolished works. I will say, congratulations to those who are actually able to finish a story. I think that's awesome. And with that, let's dive right into the video. So I discovered this story a few months ago. Full disclosure, I did read the first 10 chapters when I first found the story, but a few months have passed, so I reread them. And they were as horrible as I remembered them to be. I only made it 3 chapters further than the second time around, so I only read about 30% of the story. In keeping with the consistency of the last video, I then proceeded to skip ahead a few chapters, skimmed through it, and then read the epilogue. I don't remember much of the story. But let's start with my predictions. I made my first prediction based on how cliche the story is and also what I had read from before, and that is that she falls in love with the bad boy, which that's kind of another prediction, is that there's going to be a bad boy. My next prediction is that somewhere after they've developed feelings for each other, there's going to be some sort of climactic or dramatic fight that will cause them to separate, but then they'll come back stronger than ever or something to that extent. Third, I'm guessing that the main character finds out that the bad boy was lying about something in their relationship, or that he knew about her illness for a long time. And her being sick is introduced to us in the prologue and is very mysterious. And the fourth and final prediction is that there's going to be an epilogue. For some reason, that seems to be an ongoing trend with this genre of online stories. There's always an ending a few years into the future where they're married or going to college together or something else to show us that they lived happily ever after. And you know what? I was right. And it feels good to be right. So with that, here's some actual structure for this video. We'll go over plot, then characters, then writing, and then things I just want to complain about. And we'll end on a positive note, so stay tuned for something positive. First up, we have plot, and there isn't much, and it moves fairly quickly. Or it seems that way because I tried reading as quickly as possible. I'm doing this from memory, so bear with me. We start with a prologue, where we're introduced to the main girl. I don't remember her name, so we'll be calling her Girl. Girl has just found out that she has some sort of illness. We also find out that she has a falling out with her best friend Liam, who doesn't show up to meet with her when she wants to tell him about her illness. This leads into the first chapter, skipping 4 years ahead, and it's their first day of senior year. Girl sees Liam bullying some kid, stands up to him, and boom, Liam is hooked. He then starts popping up and creepily staring at Girl for the rest of what I read of the story. We're then introduced to Girl's best friends, which do nothing for the plot, Gemma and Hansel, who are dating, and we'll talk more about them later. Then ensues the cliche bit where the boy and the girl realize there's more to each other's lives than previously thought, or something like that. We find out that after Liam's mom passed away, his father became an alcoholic, and I think this is probably the best part of the story. While it does give into the cliche character arc of the bad boy being a bad boy because of a hard home life, it's the only part of the story that has any good depth, which we'll also get into more in the next part. Girl and Liam go on a date, and then she runs away, and then he runs after her, and they share 2 lines of dialogue, then he runs away. It's riveting stuff. I don't even remember where I stopped reading, but I skipped to the middle of the story, and they were going on some sort of road trip. No conflict seemed to have happened as of yet. Oh, we do find out that girl was adopted. She's naturally upset about it. Cool, I guess. Then I skipped to the epilogue. It's 8 years later, and someone has died. And at this point, I've read enough to be like, wait, what? So I go to the last chapter of the story, scroll up, and it's girl who has died. But of what? Since her illness this entire time has been a mystery. She dies of cancer. Not that cancer isn't a big deal, but it's how the author decides to reveal this mystery, which we'll talk more in the writing section. So then it's after the road trip that Liam finally figures out that she has cancer. He confronts Girl. Girl gets mad at him, saying he didn't have any right to know, and then he's mad. And then they end up together, and we find out that they had babies. Yay, the end. I can't tell if the plot moves too quickly or if there's just nothing going on, but it feels like I didn't read anything. By the end of the story, I think all of these things are supposed to have happened, but the plot moves at such a weird pace, it doesn't feel like anything has happened. I don't know. We're just gonna move on. We're moving on. Now characters. Ow, I just hit my hand. Now on to the characters. And the first character that we have to talk about is our main character, Girl. Girl is a girl who has a mysterious illness and loves playing piano. And these are her only 2 juxtaposing character traits. She's sick and she could die, and she loves piano. She's actually pretty good at it and was even scouted by Juilliard. But the first one isn't even a trait, but it's written like one and seems as if it's supposed to be part of her personality. Now, I don't think illness can be a character trait, but it can be used as something that affects your character. How do they handle it? How do their relationships change because of it? Does it put any stress on any other aspect of their lives? What is their motivation aside from surviving this illness? And the author does kind of answer the first and last question because she loves the piano, but the others are kind of left up in the air. When I try and think back on who Girl is as a person, I'm kind of left with nothing. She's introduced as being clumsy, shy, and keeping to herself, but then she immediately defies what we already think her character is by standing up to Liam on the first day of school. This part of her character could have been built up and developed throughout the story, but instead she acts seemingly against her nature and her character. Around Liam, she's snarky, witty, and can even be a little bit clever, but any other time in the story, she's that shy, doesn't want attention drawn to herself kind of person. And this is one of those problems with this kind of story. The author wants their main chick to be relatable and also not to take any crap from the bad boy. But then we're just given this unrealistic character that doesn't make any sense. Also, on that clumsy bit, she's clumsy as a personality trait. Now, the thing about her being clumsy is interesting. In the beginning, it's just part of who she is. And here's the example from the beginning of the story. I sighed, taking one last look in the mirror before I grabbed my bag and rushed down the stairs, almost tripping on the last step. I caught myself on the banister and looked menacingly down at my untied shoe. And I mean, that's fine. You can have your character be clumsy, but don't make it a personality trait. And then later in the story, the author uses it to show us that Girl is having health problems. She loses focus, can't stand up by herself, and even faints at one point. And this little section is from Liam's perspective. She was also acting more like a klutz than usual, dropping her books when she meant to put them in her bag, tripping over her own feet as she took a seat in calculus, and stopping in the middle of the hall as if she were a lost puppy. But why make her clumsy in the beginning if it's unrelated to anything else? Sure, Liam states that she's acting more like a klutz than usual, but I feel as if it would have been more powerful if she wasn't clumsy to begin with, and all of a sudden she's acting like a klutz, which is totally out of character for her. Anyway, there's not much else to say about her as a character. You know as much as I do at this point, and we're gonna move on to Liam. And while Liam is just a walking cliche, at least he has some things that we can talk about. Whew, now Liam. Oh, Liam. Did you know that he's a bad boy? And boy, does that fact get shoved right down our throats. Here are just a few examples from just the first 2 chapters. So, first off, in classic bad boy fashion, he is bullying some kid. The kid, my guess was that he was a freshman, was cowering before him, his hands held up to cover his face as fear radiated from him in perpetual waves. Liam leered down at him while his friends backed him up and snickered. A strange feeling overcame me, and before I knew it, I was weaving my way towards him. Cool. And then the author literally tells us that he's a bad boy. My hands were shaking when I said, "Can on Velmont High's infamous bad boy Liam rally to cause a scene on the first day of school." Oh, he's a bad boy? You don't say. So the next example of this is that he's ableist, and I can't begin to say how much I hate this part, because there is no payoff to what he says here that I know of since I didn't finish reading this. Context, girl's best friend Gemma is deaf, and they are signing in class. So, here's what Liam does. Liam cleared his throat loudly, gaining the attention from the students surrounding us. "Why don't you take your secret language somewhere else? Some of us are trying to learn." And I just hate it. And despite Liam discriminating against someone who's deaf and girl's best friend, girl just forgets this about his character and falls for him anyway. It's just really frustrating. So the next point is, of course, being a bad boy. He's all about that sex. Literally, the next part after he discriminates against Gemma's disability, girl is like, "You can move if you don't like it." And he's all like, I always like 'em feisty. Wanna go out sometime? Because that makes all the girls swoon. But I will say, despite the horribleness, at least already Liam has some characteristics to him, even if they're bad. And this last point on him being a bad boy is that he smokes on school grounds. Now, how, why, and just what? I guess he could be 18 and he could buy cigarettes, but that's never told or shown to us. So where does he get them? And second, where are the teachers? Where is there any form of authority on campus? Because this is not the last time that he's shown smoking at school. And why is it seen as cool? I don't think smoking cigarettes in high school has been cool since Greece. Oh, and he also has slate blue eyes. In case you already forgot, he has slate blue eyes. Slate blue eyes! Anyway, another part of this bad boy layer is that Liam is aggressive, and this is something that's been talked about a lot, how toxic these bad boy characters are in young adult stories. And that's because young girls begin to think that they should be treated this way if a guy really likes her, and I think that's really dangerous and unhealthy. Liam, on multiple occasions, does things despite girls saying no, and here are some examples of that. First, context. Girl is walking home in the rain. All of a sudden, Liam shows up, and girl is confused. Liam gave me a bewildered look and grasped my hand as he began to pull me towards his motorcycle, or bike as I like to call it, a bike with an engine. "You're going to catch your death. Take the favor." I snatched my hand from his grasp, digging my heels to the ground. He stopped, eyeing me warily. I don't need your help. I'm not a lost puppy. I know my way home. I also know that you get sick easily. Stop being stubborn and hop on, he said, motioning to his bike. I won't bite. And, couple things. One, why are you grabbing someone you haven't talked to in years and trying to force them to accept a favor from you? Second, why are you eyeing her warily? You literally randomly showed up, are forcing a ride home, and she's saying no, and you're like, why are you saying no? That's suspicious. It's just, oh my gosh. The next part of this scene is girl asking how he just showed up and why he's there, and he doesn't even answer her question. I'm sorry, but if someone randomly showed up, it's raining, it's dark, there's no one around, and it's not even on the way to their house, I'm going to be suspicious, and you better answer me as to why you're trying to force me to go home with you or to take me home. I can't even speak right now. I'm so frustrated. So we're going to move on to the next example of him being aggressive. In this next example, these are all screenshots, so I don't always remember the context around it. But in this one, girl is literally describing Liam as a lion, and he's a predator and she's a prey, and she's literally saying that she's scared. Well, he stalked forward, closing the gap between us. It was like he was a prowling lion and I was a poor antelope waiting for his teeth to tear into my flesh. I stepped back, shivering at the thought. She's clearly frightened, or at least scared, of what he's going to be doing. That's not okay. That's such a horrible and unhealthy mentality to have about someone. You should never feel unsafe around someone. If you do, leave. Tell someone. Get out of there. Please. Okay, we're moving on. I'm really getting angry. Okay, we gotta stay on script because otherwise I'm just gonna go off on something. Okay, so this next one, the context is that girl got sick at school. Liam convinced girl's dad to let him take her home, which we will get into later. And so apparently she's freezing cold. She's in bed, and we're just gonna read this. She didn't say anything as I began to take off my shoes, climbing into the bed with her. What in God's name are you? It's called body heat. You're shaking in your bones like you have hypothermia. The sheets aren't helping. Might as well be some use to you. She protested and tried to squirm from my grasp as I pulled her close to me. This is wrong. So wrong on so many levels. Saving your life is wrong. I wouldn't call this saving my life. I've been sick before and have been fine without you. This is no different, she defended. Literally, she says no. She is like, what are you doing? And he's literally pulling her close to him. And she's protesting and trying to squirm out of his grasp. She says she's fine. She's handled this before. And is obviously uncomfortable with what he plans to do. Like, that is just not okay. And the fact that this author is romanticizing this, I think, is so dangerous, is so not okay. And just... So that's one layer of his character. Let's move on to the next. In this next bit, we see past his bad boy layer when he breaks up with his popular girlfriend, Kayla, or something. No, you're pathetic, she spat. My jumbled thoughts seized as I turned my attention back to them. You think that sleeping with girls will make you numb? Well, you go it. I just noticed that typo. Well, you go it, Liam. You are a heartless bastard who will never be fully satisfied. Go find some other girl who will put it up with your daddy issues. Liam's shoulders tensed. Her words shattered the disinterested demeanor he'd so carefully constructed. There was a shift in his behavior like a pot of boiling water bubbling over the rim when it was left on the stove for too long. His gaze was no longer careless, but guarded. They held each other's intensely fused stares, neither folding. So, bad boy Liam has a hard home life. Who could have ever guessed? And as I said before, this aspect of the story is the only good part. So we see the dad after this in two different scenes. First is when Liam comes home and Liam sees his dad passed out on the couch, and we get some internal exposition. Mom passed away, dad drowned himself in alcohol. And I think it's great because it shows something that's real. There are other aspects of the story that are mostly fantasy, cliche, and whatnot, but becoming an alcoholic is something that actually happens to a lot of people after traumatic events, and that's what makes this part great. It adds a layer of realism to the story, and it shows that even though his dad is going through this really difficult time, Liam still cares about him and his welfare. Emptying the last cans into the black trash bag, I glanced at his heavily intoxicated demeanor as his light snoring filled the quiet space. I reached forward, grabbing the ends of the blanket, and brought it to his chin, tucking him under the wool's warmth. I whispered, "Night, Dad," and left him on the couch to sleep the effects of being inebriated. The next time that we see Liam's father, it's a bit intense, but Girl stops by his house to give Liam back his jacket. Liam tries to get her to leave, and we hear off-screen the dad yelling for another beer. Liam is now caught in an awkward situation. He's kept this part of his life secret, and now with his dad awake and Girl on the front porch, his worlds are colliding. Liam ultimately leaves it up to Girl to decide whether or not she leaves or if she comes in to chat about whatever. And she decides to go in. And boy, does the author lay on the alcoholic father stereotype. I was slightly shocked by how abrasive the father was, but it is the thing that I remember the most. I'll put the screenshots of this scene up on the screen so you can read it, because it's a little long and I don't really want to read all of it. But anyway, so we also get to see the shame that Liam has for his father. It's not like he could have done anything to change it. He was just a kid. But there is this regret and embarrassment Liam has when Girl comes over, which I think actually shows some depth of Liam's character versus Girl, who we're told is sick right off the bat and are supposed to accept as part of her character instead of building up to it, giving us some clues, and then revealing it. Short story long, even though Liam is cookie cutter character, at least he has layers that get revealed. Girl is just boring as all heck. I'm sure there's more to his character that we could talk about, but I didn't read anymore, and there wasn't much shown except his love for Girl in the epilogue. I think he cried at her graveside or something. Whatever. Now, on to the best friends. First, we have Gemma, whose only character trait besides being perfect is that she's deaf, and Hansel, or whatever his name was, is a reformed bad boy that randomly starts liking and then dating Gemma literally out of nowhere. Here's how that's described, and his name is Hayden. Luckily, Hayden saw the error of his ways, being a bad boy, thanks to Gemma's sweet nature. At the beginning, there was a language barrier between them. But when two people loved each other, words were not needed. It was all about body language and the actions that one committed to the other and vice versa. Hayden's declaration of love, per se, was when he sat with us one day at lunch a year ago. He blatantly walked up to our table, asked if he could join us, and when we agreed, he took a seat next to Gemma, acting as if that moment of perpetual defiance never occurred. I'm sorry. What? How is that a declaration of love? They had never talked before. He was a previous bad boy, so in a matter of seconds, he just changed his character like that? I'm just so confused about how this explains anything. Okay, whatever. We're moving on. So that's pretty much all we know about these characters. I know Gemma and Girl get into an argument somewhere in the middle where I was skimming, but they're friends again by the end. It doesn't change their relationship or who they are, so whatever. Lastly are the parents, I guess. I don't know. The dad is a teacher at the school and mom does something else. They're fine. The dad was a former bad boy, which is part of the reason why he dislikes Liam so much. I guess everyone was just a former bad boy. I don't know. But there is this one scene that just confuses me so much involving Girl's dad and Liam. And we're just going to read this whole part in its entirety. So come along on this journey with me. All right, context. Girl has fainted. Liam has brought her to the nurse's office, and the dad is there. They're trying to figure out who can cover the dad's class because the dad wants to take his daughter home, as a normal person would. Sir, I interjected. This is Liam. He turned his attention to me and gave me a loaded glance. There was no time to mend the rift I had caused between him and I. It was something to fix another time, if I could fix it. What mattered now was Anya. Oh, that's the girl's name, Anya. I could take her home. It won't be an inconvenience to me. Besides missing school. Whatever. He paused, thinking. He rubbed a hand at the back of his neck and said, No, I suppose not, but I certainly won't allow my daughter on the back of a motorcycle in the state she's in. He was right. She didn't have the strength to withstand the speed and velocity I'd be driving to get her home. I glanced over to where she lay with a cold cloth on her forehead to sponge the excess of sweat her body was generating. She was pale and looked deathly sick. I felt useless, someone without a purpose in the room as I did nothing to help her. When I looked back at Mr. Vanchester, he was talking to Ellen, making arrangements to leave with Anya. I'll take your car, I said without thinking, but felt the surge of resolve in my words. I'll leave my bike here and come back for it later. I was certain that this was a good plan. Mr. Vanchester could keep my bike for leverage for all I cared. He shook his head. No, that's not... Daddy? We all turned at the sound of the small voice coming from the corner of the room. Her mouth was parted as she searched for her dad's eyes. Mr. Vanchester hurried to her side and ran a hand over her forehead tenderly. Let him, Daddy. You have work. I'll be okay. Honey, I don't think it's a good... Her voice was soft and strange when she said, It's decided. There was an understanding that passed through them in that one simple statement. It left me wondering the significance of her words as Mr. Vanchester turned and swiftly tossed me his car keys. Now, the scene is supposed to be some sort of moving scene between the girl's father and her future love interest, but it just doesn't make any sense. For one, a man's daughter has fainted at school and seems to be deathly sick, and yet he's like, oh, I can't go because no one will cover my class. That's not usually how it works. You can take your ailing child home and classes will usually merge, or they'll get another teacher to cover your class because your daughter's health is very important. He wouldn't give another student his keys to take his daughter home because then that student would be missing school, which is illegal, and the kid could get in a lot of trouble, and so could he. Like, this scene just baffles me so much, and I think it is so hilariously confusing. I love it. I love it so much. All right, we are almost done. I think this is going to be my favorite part, and we're talking about the writing. Where to even begin? So I will say the writing isn't the worst thing I've ever read, but it's kind of definitely up there. The main problem that I have with the writing is its lack of variety. You usually want to vary the sentence structure, length, type. There should be a definite writing style, and it should be consistent. And this story doesn't really do any of those things. There are multiple places where the tense changes from one sentence to the next. Like this example, there's a blanket discarded on the floor and I drape it over him, which is present tense, and then it goes to past tense. I sighed and kneeling down once again to pick up the jagged edges of glass. Whatever. It just reads very plainly, and for some reason, there's this other thing where the author is very keen on letting us know exactly what time it is. And here are some examples, and it's very distracting. And I would understand if it was part of the plot and it drove the story forward, but it doesn't. As for the dialogue is confusing. It doesn't read realistically, as in this example, I don't recall the context, but Liam is saying, I didn't know you cared after you stood me up. I don't, I lied, and I did not stand you up. We weren't on a date or anything. The nerve of him. Here I was, trying to be a good person, and he turns the tables around to something of insignificance. What did he even mean about standing him up? Okay, if she didn't know what he meant about standing him up, she wouldn't have started with saying, I didn't stand you up, we weren't on a date or anything. She doesn't know what he's talking about. A normal person would have been like, I lied, in response to caring. And what do you mean, standing you up? I didn't stand you up. What are you talking about? She would definitely have expressed her confusion as to what he said. I hate when stories do this, where a character goes along with a misunderstanding and they don't actually know what's going on. Just speak up. Because you can have misunderstandings in your story if they're fun or they make sense. This just doesn't make any sense. So this next example kind of is something I'll talk about later. But this part is where a girl is talking to Liam about Liam's friends and how, like, why does Liam hang out with them? Then why do you pretend to be something you aren't? You obviously aren't like them. Why do you wear a mask every day of your life since you abandoned me? And people just don't really talk like this. The first half, yes. But when was the last time someone in random discussion was just like, why are you wearing a mask? Usually we just say, why aren't you being yourself? Or why are you pretending to be something else? And it's so funny because girl makes it about her once again. So it's not even just like, well, why do you wear a mask every day of your life? Like, why are you pretending to be someone that you aren't? It's, why do you wear a mask every day of your life since you abandoned me? Like, girl, it's not about you right now. It's about Liam and his friends and why he hangs out with them. It's not... whatever. We're moving on. So, oh my gosh. My favorite part of this story, and one of the main reasons why I wanted to make this video in the first place, is the similes. Dear Lord, the similes. This part of the video will probably take up a lot of time, so feel free to skip ahead, but you will be missing out on the best part, trust me. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put them up on the screen, and we're going to read them together. Because, oh my gosh, they're hilarious. Now, of course, I don't have anything against similes or metaphors, but it's when they're used to this extent that it's hilarious. And so I don't think I'll read all of them, but I'll just give you my top favorites. I don't know. It might be all of them. We'll see how it goes. But join me on this wonderful journey. The wind howled in mourning like a widow at the bedside of her husband in passing. I loved the piano just as much as it was necessary to breathe. Today hadn't been an ordinary day filled with dungeons and dragons or damsels in distress being rescued by the love of their lives, because obviously that's an ordinary day. Today, everything changed as the knowledge I'd gained swept into the very core of my existence, settling there like a turtle in its shell. It was a part of me. It always had been. The air around me burned my skin, gnawing at it like fire ants, leaving a trace of their brutality behind. Okay. The sound was loud like thunder as it echoed throughout the hallway. Everyone began to scatter like deer trying to get away from their predator. Guess who was the predator? She tilted her head in thought, then signed. Maybe he's drawn to you like moth to a flame because you stood up to him and it was the first time you've talked to him in years. He looked at me like I was a pest that he was examining under a microscope. It was strange and uncommon. Like an eclipse, it only happened rarely and after years of it being dormant. She looked like shit today. I'm sorry. Her skin was abnormally pasty like the color of a blank sheet of paper. I couldn't erase the sullen look on her face from this afternoon. Guilt washed over my mind like a shattered dam rapidly spilling all the water supply from its reservoir. Oh my god, these are horrible. Oh my gosh. Carla gave me a death stare that could only be perceived by me, somehow, making my skin crawl like she dumped a bucket of 1,000 live spiders all over my body. Ew. I rolled my eyes at his theatrics. Hayden was like the big brother I never wished for, but apparently received one Christmas morning. This one, oh my gosh, cracks me up so much. If he's an older brother, It's not like, this could be a metaphor for, them announcing a pregnancy on Christmas. But he's an older brother. So I just like to imagine that under the Christmas tree, there's just this body wrapped for her. And she opens it up and it's him. And she's just like, I'm sorry, what? In a way, he was like a piece in a score. There were harmonies and melodies that fitted perfectly within a composition. Then there were single moments within the piece that were unlike the rest of the music. It was passionate and beautiful and exhilarating, kind of like how Liam was. With Carla's threat, I felt insignificant like an ant scurrying in the dirt, making that small space grow into a gaping hole. Many followed afterwards like the slow sprinkling of rain falling from the sky, relentless once it began. Whew. But my heart would always remain cautious like a girl treading through the forest, alert in case of a wild tiger ready to strike. You can't break up with me, she said again, stopping her foot like a petulant child. She huffed and puffed like the big bad wolf himself. His words were sharp like a knife, struck right through her heart. My heart swelled with pity as I saw the walls she'd built slowly cave in, while Liam stood stoic like a Greek statue, cold and distant. I looked up at the old weathered sign of the music shop, feeling nostalgic as memories surfaced in my mind like a river flowing downstream. See, with this one, I feel like you don't have to have the word downstream, because if a river is flowing, it's obviously flowing downstream because gravity exists. So it's not like you're going to say a river flowing upstream. You can walk upstream, but a river doesn't flow upstream. My head was constantly spinning like a dancing tabletop, while my stomach was having an acrobatic show that I was not aware of until the very last minute. I felt like a lion tamer in the middle of the stage as everyone's cool gaze watched my every move, waiting for me to have my flesh mauled by the lion's paws. Like, you can describe things differently. You don't always have to compare stuff. Like this one, okay, my head was constantly spinning like a dancing tabletop, while my stomach was having an acrobatic show that I was not aware of until the very last minute. Let's rewrite this, okay? I was dizzy. There we go. My stomach felt like it wouldn't be able to keep my lunch down. Boom. There you go. Short, simple. It's not a simile. You're describing that you're dizzy. You're saying you're dizzy and you're describing that feeling of about to vomit. There you go. I backed away at the sound of his voice. Liam's voice. It was cruel and predatorily, like he was fighting claims over land, but instead he was fighting for me. Theater practice began 20 minutes after school ended with no real change, except for Carla's terrible singing, but it was more like screeching nails on a chalkboard. I don't get it. So she says Carla's singing is terrible, and then she's like, well, no, but it was more like screeching nails on a chalkboard. That is also terrible. So she's saying that Carla's singing is terrible, but it was more like something else that's terrible. Like, you don't need to have that extra descriptive thing. You already described her singing as terrible. Just leave it at that. Or, instead of saying Carla's terrible singing, you could say, with no real change, except for Carla's singing, which was like screeching nails on a chalkboard. Boom. No repetition. Short, simple. There you go. He began to steer me away from the porch like I was a sheep without a shepherd, needing to be led in the right direction. Too bad he wasn't a shepherd, or else I would have done what he asked. There was another shout from the house that traveled to our ears like leaves in the air on a windy day. Oh my God, this is just so bad. Stop it. Literally, as I'm reading this, every single time there's a simile, I'm like, please stop. Just for the love of God, stop. He didn't let go of my arm until I looked up and met his gaze. He was watching me. No, calculating me like I was this equation that he didn't know the answer to. Once again, he's grabbing her arm without consent. A migraine had begun to appear at the back of my mind, like a small jackhammer that became louder with each passing sound. Her voice was soft, like a feather. My name sounded distant, like it had long ago drifted away in the air. Ugh. My limbs felt of cinder. Everything was stiff and heavy, like I was trapped in quicksand in the middle of a burning hot desert. Okay, First, she says her limbs felt of cinder and everything was stiff and heavy, but then, like she was trapped in quicksand. Quicksand isn't stiff or heavy. It feels more like you're being pulled, and sand is a little bit softer. It just feels like two contrasting similes being used for the same. It's just bad. Okay. Oh, this one is, yes. Okay, so this is about Gemma and Liam, and Gemma is talking to Liam, and this is how he describes it. She nodded and began speaking words that I could not understand. Her words were pronounced differently and sounded strange to my ears. It was like she was a foreign exchange student trying to speak English but was not getting anywhere. Okay, couple things. One, foreign exchange students don't always only speak their native language. Also, foreign exchange students could be from England, where they speak English. So that comparison doesn't really work at all. And second, deaf people aren't that difficult to understand. They are speaking English. Their words might just be sound like a little muffled. But I don't know, I just feel like this part is a little inconsiderate. Oh, that's it. Okay. Now on to the last section of random things that I want to complain about. Yay! Let's get into it. So this first one is about how Liam seems to be following girl to her first class after she stands up to him and she's all like, "Why is he following me?" We then find out that students are put into classes by last name. So if that's the case, wouldn't they have had a lot of classes together before? And if girl knows that it's by last name, then why is she surprised when her and Liam have a class together? I don't know. It's really weird. Moving on. There's this weird description of what girl's dad's school meeting might look like. And so it says, Dad had a first day of school meeting, and I imagined that they would throw a grand old party filled with confetti, balloons, cake, the whole shebang. I don't think there'd be confetti and balloons for adult teachers. Like, there might be cake. That'd be really cool. But then they'd have to clean up the confetti and the balloons, and that's a lot of work. I just thought it was a little bit unrealistic. And then they'd probably celebrate the first day of school and the very fact that no teacher committed murder or strangled a child. I'm sorry, what? I work with children. I've never celebrated the fact that I haven't murdered or strangled a child because that's not something that happens a lot. So if you're going to celebrate something like that, you would have to celebrate every day, which seems really weird. Like, it's not like they were murderers before and now they're, getting their 100-day non-murdering chip. This is then followed by a weird description of her peanut butter and banana sandwich. It weirds me out. I don't know. This is just me being really picky. I just think she could have used this description on something else, whatever. So this is the scene that follows after Liam is like forcing girl to let him give her a ride home. And so she ends up going on his bike with him. And this is what really bothers me about a lot of these stories is that they just had a scene where she's like protesting and saying no, and he ends up like forcing her to do what he wants, and she's all like, I could feel the hardness of his abs underneath his leather jacket. Then there was the strong scent of his musk that strangely smelled of cinnamon as I breathed him in. It reminded me of warm winter nights sitting by the fire drinking eggnog while we talked about everything and nothing. What in the world was I doing? I mentally slapped myself and closed my eyes, blocking away all the thoughts. Like, despite him being a jerk, she's like, oh, but you're so attractive, and wait, no, I can't be attracted to you. It just, I hate it so much. Okay, next one. Okay, holy crap, this simile is one that I didn't add in that writing section. So, context. Liam is going on about how he can't stop seeing girl everywhere, and he goes on and on about how she's all he can think about. And then this happens. In the last 4 years, I hadn't seen or heard a squeak out of her, and now she's everywhere. She was like the plague. No matter how hard I tried to rid myself of the disease, it would always inflict its torture wherever I was. And he compares her to the frickin' plague. Now, it might just be me, but that seems a little inappropriate. I mean, it literally killed 200 million people. That would be like if I wrote something that said, I had been rejected again. Hearing those words made my heart sink faster than the Titanic. Like, do you hear how insensitive that is? I just don't think it's okay to make that kind of description or simile. Like, she was like the plague. No! The plague killed hundreds of millions of people! What? No! Like, don't do that! Oh my god, this one was just... Oh my gosh. Oh man. Okay, we're gonna move on. We're moving on. Okay, this next one is when Liam hears girl playing music, and oh my gosh, it just made me laugh. Okay. How anyone could still be enclosed within the school's doors was beyond me. But as I walked towards the theater, I heard the sound of music resonating from inside in delicate, passionate lulls. It was music weaved especially for a person to be utterly captivated by the melody. It was entrancing and spellbinding as the melody seeped into the marrow of my bones, spreading through my veins. The sound of music drew my curiosity closer, my steps softly padding down the hallway, afraid of fracturing the stream if it was one. My hand never wavered from the door's hinges. Okay, why are your hands on the hinges? They should be on the handle. Whatever. As I pried them open as quietly as I could to not disturb the flow of the harmony. It opened with a slight creak on its hinges, because your hands are on it, but it wasn't loud enough to break the connection. The theater was dark and empty, with only the single glow of the spotlight illuminating the vast space. Turning the corner, my eyes fell on a girl wearing a royal blue dress, seated on a bench, leaning over the old-school piano where the sweet, caressing music emitted. My breath caught in my throat as I realized who the girl was. I should have known. If anyone could put her heart and soul into music, it was Anya. The piece she was playing moved in a slow, inclining motion to only increase in a burst of fervor. I watched her body move to the melody she played. Under the low light, she looked like an unearthly being, like an angel sent from above to indulge mankind with her gift. Her slender, delicate fingers danced over the keys in a secret whisper, each note indulging me in a bittersweet, nostalgic feeling. Okay. Like I said, I work with children on a daily basis and even volunteer in a nursery, and cleaning up after them, even on the craziest messy days, takes maybe 10 minutes. And that's when there's like 12 children. The fact that it takes them twice that long is just ridiculous to me, because that room is definitely not messy. They're at the hospital and they've like read a couple books to the children. They have a couple blocks to pick up and just some books to put away. Don't tell me it took you 20 whole minutes to clean up that room. For some reason, this just really bugs me, because it definitely did not take 20 minutes to clean up the room. This is just me being like, no, not 20 minutes. Whatever. Okay, moving on. Okay, this one is just super random. It's uncomfortably graphic and doesn't fit with the tone of the rest of the story. She's like remembering something from her past, and this is what it says. It was mid-afternoon with the sun beating down on my back. I was playing in the yard where I was squishing ants and roly-polies to a bloody pulp. Excuse me? It just was like super abrasive and just like, whoa, I can't even talk. Super abrasive, and it just kind of took me out of the story, because I had to be like, wait, what did you just say? Alright, and here's some other screenshots that I took of stuff that just didn't make any sense to me. You can pause the video and read them for yourself, because I don't want to give them any other time. But now we're going to move on to the last bit. I promised you that we would look at something positive, and I am going to give you the positives right now. So this is when Liam comes to ask her father's permission to take her out, And she opens the door, and I actually laughed at this part. My eyes widened in shock, and I shut the door in his face because I just love the image of like someone opening the door, seeing someone they don't want to see or are surprised to see, and then they just like slam the door in their face in a knee-jerk reaction. And I just think that's really funny. So this part got a light chuckle out of me. It's where we see girl and her mom's perspective on Liam's change in personality or character. And the mom calls it being a teenage boy. Girl calls it being an ass and trading your best friend for popularity. And I don't know. I just thought that was a funny and clever way to show the difference in perspectives that they had for Liam. So, good job. Anyway, oh my gosh, that is the end. Oh man, imagine if I had read the whole story. This video would have been never ending. I hope you enjoyed this review / commentary. I'm thinking I want to do more content like this. Maybe not as long though, because this is very long. Let me know in the comments section below what I should read next, or if you have any suggestions. All right, see you in the next one. Bye.